Back then, I was really afraid that TikTok would hunt me down and sue me.
Did you get any threats?
From TikTok?
Yeah. When we started this podcast, Invested, I wanted to explore how people's values influence their economic decisions. I met Barak Herscowitz, although I'd heard his name before. I met him after he began to tweet about what he was learning about TikTok and what was going on there, and how content moderation and what was getting out on TikTok was influencing the discourse in the West, how it was so pro-Hamas and pro-Houthi and everything else. And then Barak basically put his job on the line because of his values. He put his job on the line and called out nefarious behavior at TikTok and in their policies at great personal risk, financial risk, and personal risk. And I thought it was very important that his story be told in this context of that trade-off between professional success, financial gain, professional opportunity, and the values that he holds dear. And in the war since October 7th, if one thing has become clear, that if we don't put our values first, the West, Israel, and other places are going to end up in a bad place. And I think Barak is a great example of what it is to put your values first, how we can tell that story to the West, and what we can do in order to promote these values globally. I'm super excited to have Barak Herscowitz with me here today for the next episode of Invested. Welcome, Barak.
Thanks for inviting me.
Barak Herscowitz is a former government and public sector vertical lead at TikTok Israel and a former advisor to former Prime Minister Naftali Bennet. Welcome, Barak.
Hi.
Tell us your core value.
I am a huge advocate for liberty, personal liberties. And, I never thought about core values or liberty until I spent a few years in the United States. And then I went to Cuba for a trip. And it was such an interesting experience. And somehow I found a cab driver who took me around, me and a few other friends. He took us on a trip around the island in Cuba. And then he said that he wants to send his daughter to the United States. And he teaches her English and he wants her to be ready to go to the United States. I don't know if it's still the case, but back then they would send kids on, it's like pirate boats, basically. It was very dangerous. Many people would die on the way or would get caught or whatever. And we asked them, why would you want to send her on such a dangerous trip to the United States? I mean, things look fine here. Things are okay. And he said that for him, his daughter is like a very precious little bird. And a little bird in a cage can never fully enjoy what life has to offer. And he wants her to be in the States, even though, it's obviously what he sees as America is an unrealistic, image. But he wanted her to have all the opportunities to fail or to succeed. That changed me very much. And I think my core values, freedom.
What does liberty or freedom mean to you? Define it.
I heard something interesting on the Very Wise podcast recently. And she said that freedom is the right to say, when you see something that is incorrect, when you see the lie triumphs over the truth, for example, freedom is to be able to say, not in my name. You can do whatever you want, not in my name. I wouldn't take part in this thing that I don't agree with. So freedom is the ability to navigate your life in the way that you feel that is right, I guess.
What if your personal freedom interferes with somebody else's freedom or some other group's freedom? How do we deal with that?
It's always hard. There are smarter people than me throughout history that discuss those questions and maybe have some answers. Generally speaking, people need to think, what if they were on the other side? And it might be easier for them to decide then.
That's like the famous statement of Hillel the Elder, one of the great Jewish sages, right? What you hate, don't do unto other people.
It's true.
What would anger you, don't do unto other people. I still think like in modern society, we've come to a point where people, so to speak, very individual freedoms or taste buds or whatever it is can often threaten a larger collective people. And for myself, I find myself struggling with this notion of what has become individual freedom, which is not like you talked about the guy from Cuba, which is, hey, I want my daughter to be able to get out of the cage and experience, but let's use an example of what's going on in America right now. People disrupting college graduations, a small group of people disrupting college graduations, which is the biggest day of many people's lives when they're graduating college. And so they're expressing their individual freedom, but it's at the expense of the experience of many others, or the encampments on college campuses today, which is my individual freedom, so to speak, to keep other people out.
I think it's a very easy case, because colleges, universities are supposed to be the place where you listen to different opinions, different facts, different thesis, right? And then you decide what's right for you. You spark process of thinking, and then you decide what you take from each professor or each colleague or each friend. And when one group or one individual denies you from access to the discourse, to knowledge, to being on campus physically, I think it's a very easy case.
Right, but it's they're exercising their individual freedom to see that first, they don't want to hear other opinions, and two, they want to make sure that you can't get access to those quote unquote dangerous opinions. So why is that not exercising your individual freedom?
You can speak up and say whatever you want. You can speak up. You can express whatever fringe idea that you have. But if you actively prevent people from going to, what happened on Columbia is that Jewish students and Jewish professors were instructed to stay at home. This is crazy.
Right.
So once you prevent people from being a part of this discussion and access to knowledge, I think it's a very simple case. How do you think we can change the tide with the young Americans and their perspective?
I don't think it's just about young Americans, for what it's worth. I think it's a general malaise of the West, where we've lost the confidence as multiculturalism kind of set in, and universities were taken over by a lot of these DI departments, and we began to identify people not by what they think, but by some external characteristic. We began to lose the confidence that the values of the West are better. They lead to more innovation, they lead to more freedom, they lead to more prosperity for humankind, and they actually galvanize people to do amazing things. And I think the first thing we have to get back is the optimism about the future of Western values. I think that's something we should teach and we should insist on, that this system is actually a better system for prosperity and human flourishing, and that freedom is a cardinal right of people. Iran is not a free society today. Russia is not a free society. China is not a free society. Gaza is certainly not a free society. People live under the threat of death and violence all the time. It's like we were talking about before, this notion of quote-unquote queers for Palestine, where they wouldn't last one day in Gaza.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Is the most ridiculous thing. But it's emblematic. It shouldn't be taken as a joke, because it's emblematic of deep confusion. And I think every few decades, some of these Marxist notions show up in the West. But it's important to just state very clearly that we think this system is better. They're free to live with their system if they'd like to in China, but that should not penetrate the Western system. I think the other thing is kids. I think the decline of what's gone on in Western society has to do with the decline in demographics and the decline in childbirth. And I think people are more optimistic about the future when they have kids. I think one of the amazing things about Israel is how many children there are here. And that makes us more optimistic, causes us to invest in the future, and it forces us to teach our values, because we have to teach them to our children. And I think, by the way, that's an incredible insight of the Torah, which spends a lot of time saying, teach it to your kids, even in the Shema prayer, right? It's teach it to your kids. And I think that reinforces our own certainty that these values that you opened with, by the way, which is liberty and freedom, are so foundational. And it's the foundation of the U.S. Constitution. It comes from the foundation of the Bible. It comes from the beginning of Western civilization in Greece. And I think we have to insist on those topics, and that we need to be unabashedly outspoken about them, and tell our kids that they're better. This will be a good segue to a topic I want to spend a lot of time, which is TikTok and your incredible bravery and freedom that you expressed there.
You.
Before we get there, what was it like working for the Prime Minister Bennet?
It's great. So I started as his campaign manager when he ran for office, which was very hectic and very interesting. And then I joined the Prime Minister's office, and I was sort of like the spokesperson of the government for COVID. Every message that the government had wanted to deliver to the public was under my supervision. I thought it was a great experience, and especially with Naftali Bennet, he's done something very interesting that not many people know, that I thought was very unique and very different than other politicians. And maybe it's something that he learned in high tech. He would start every morning with a meeting with all of the relevant ministers. They needed to report on their tasks. Okay, they would report their failures, and then him as a prime minister, the general approach that he had is it's okay to fail, just share it with us in order for everyone else to be able to help you to succeed. This is something very different than what we usually see in politics. So people weren't afraid to say, I didn't succeed in this and that, and then everyone else would really think how they can step in and help them.
It's like a stand-up meeting at a startup company. I was fortunate actually to be the investor in one of the investors in his startup in Toyota.
Cool.
Yeah, and so I sat around his board table, et cetera. He is a good manager.
Yeah,
of people. I'm glad to hear that the acceptance of failure and let's just fix it all together has kind of extended from his time at Toyota to
I think people in the beginning people were shocked. I think he taught many people how to manage with the failures, how to manage with struggles, and how to be candid and open about it.
Would you like him to be prime minister again?
I think he'll be better than most other candidates, and hopefully, I don't know.
Is that a low bar? It's like a low bar to get over.
I think the bar is not very high, and I think I think we need to give some chance to new blood to come into the system and maybe see things differently.
And so you work for the Prime Minister, Naftali Bennet. You think there should be new blood in politics. You were in politics, but then you got out of politics and went to TikTok. What made you make the jump from kind of the political side of being in politics to TikTok and kind of representing, call it a corporate interest vis-a-vis the government?
On a personal level, I wanted some time in the business sector, and I wanted to experience the business sector as well. But on a deeper level, when I was in the government, we were always trying to find new ways to approach new audiences with messaging about COVID. For example, I give you an interesting example with the Haredim.
The ultra-Orthodox, yeah.
Yeah, so they don't watch TV, basically most of them. They had lack of trust in the government, and we tried to find new ways to approach them. So I don't know if our audience knows what happens in ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods, that you post posters, basically.
What are called in Yiddish pashkevilim.
Pashkevilim.
Right, pashkevilim, these giant, generally white, but not always, posters with big black letters on them. They give a
very informative.
Very informative, yes.
Yeah. So we tried this Pashkevilim campaign on billboards in Karadi, in ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods. This is how we try to approach these audiences. So we tried different ways. And one of the things we tried was TikTok. It was a brand new...
That's not with the ultra-Orthodox community.
No, these are... but you would be surprised to know how many ultra-Orthodox are on TikTok.
I would be surprised. Tell me.
There are some. They have two cell phones, some of them. So the
kosher phone in the right pocket and the smartphone in the left pocket. Yeah, I know well.
So some of them are on TikTok. But we use TikTok to approach mostly younger audiences and also the Arab audience that heavily uses TikTok, to be honest. We learned it on the go. And I saw the huge impact that TikTok had. It was very, very powerful tool for us as a government. And I pitched my position to TikTok. I told them that I personally saw firsthand the impact that TikTok has, how the government can use it, and I can bring in the rest of the ministries to operate on TikTok. And the idea was, back then it was seen by many, maybe still, as a silly app for dancing cats and kids and stuff like that. And I told them that if we will onboard the government, the banks will come, the healthcare providers, the food industry, everyone will follow, because it will give the platform some sort of credibility. So that was my pitch, basically. And I joined TikTok. 2 weeks after I pitched it, I just joined the company.
And what was the job exactly?
So my job was it was called government and public sector vertical lead. I was in charge of basically onboarding the government. I was in charge of making them open TikTok accounts, advertise on TikTok, be active on TikTok.
How long were you at TikTok for?
A bit more than 2 years.
A bit more than 2 years.
Yeah.
And you onboarded the Israeli government to TikTok
Yeah.
and many other good businesses. When did you resign from TikTok?
I resigned in January,
this year?
January, this year,
Of 2024.
Yeah.
Right.
Mid-January, but
3 months after October 7th
yes.
or so.
Yes.
What caused you to resign from TikTok?
First, I must say that generally speaking, my 2 years there were great. Were very, very positive and great experience, and there are amazing people working in the Israeli office. So it was a good experience. And then October 7th broke, and we were that Saturday, we were all, obviously as Israelis, we were all in shock and hid from rockets in shelters. So this was a very harsh day. But as a TikTok employee, there was something else, because we saw that morning that TikTok and other platforms as well are being used by Hamas. So I don't know if many people know, but Hamas, they broadcasted on live their atrocities, which was crazy, and they mobilized some of their supporters to cross the border to come into Israel using those social media platforms. The Israeli team was very, very fast to ring all the bells, wake up. Remember, it's very early in the morning, Saturday. No one works in the European offices or in America, but we rang all the bells, and we made sure that everyone wakes up and get into action. And Hamas related accounts were blocked immediately that same day. So I was very proud of TikTok, very proud of my workplace. But then right after that, a day after, things started to change and to shift. And it started with the government being blocked from advertising on TikTok.
The Israeli government.
The Israeli government.
Yeah.
So it was
your client.
My client. They were completely blocked from advertising on TikTok right on October, I think, 8th.
Mm-hmm.
The reasons were they used Beyachad Nenatzach, together we will win slogans on their videos, and it was considered political by TikTok to use it. I thought that this policy decision wasn't fair, but I asked the policy teams why, and then they said that anything related to any conflict, any political conflict or any war, we try to get out of the platform, and especially in paid ads. And so I communicated this to the government,
mm-hmm.
and the government, they didn't have much to do. And then later on, I think the following week, all of the videos for the hostage families that tried to raise awareness abroad to the hostage crisis, they were banned as well. And I was sent to talk with the Hostage Family Forum and, communicate this to them, that we don't allow any campaigns that are related to any war or any conflict. So it's not against you, it's not against Israel, it's not against the hostages. And I felt very comfortable communicating it, because I had an unwritten agreement in my head, with TikTok, that I communicate those messages, those policies to my clients, as long as it's being fairly and equally implemented
mm-hmm.
on everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense, right?
Yes. Sometimes,
but then I saw that this wasn't the case. Then I saw that there were very heavily funded campaigns for Palestinians by pro-Palestinian groups or organizations that showed very disturbing images of kids in the rubbles in Gaza, testifying how much they're hungry and they're being bombarded all the time by the IDF. This ran on the platform smoothly. And then I asked the company, how come? I mean, I wasn't even against it. I said, but if this is allowed, then campaigns for hostages obviously should be allowed. And I never got any real response. They would always say, yeah, we're gonna check it, but for now this is the policy, and they didn't change it. So I felt, to me, what I saw is a bias against Israel, an anti-Semitic bias. And then later on there was something Also very interesting, a campaign by Birthright.
Birthright's the organization that helps Jewish kids and young adults come to Israel for it's basically a free trip once a
It's
year.
an
It's a
educational
philanthropic
trip.
educational trip given by philanthropists.
So they try to promote a program for volunteering in Israel, with mostly in agriculture, because many of the foreign workers just escape the country.
Yeah, there were a lot of Thailandis killed and then taken hostage. For example, in Thailand, these are the farm workers, or some of the farm workers in Israel, and they were taken hostage or killed on October 7th. And
Right,
so
and many
a
of
number
their
of them
friends
left.
just left.
Yeah.
So Taglit's Birthrights try to recruit volunteers to the programs here in Israel. And this was also banned by TikTok because two reasons. One is that many of them had the saying Am Yisrael Chai on their shirts. The people of Israel live. Am Yisrael Chai it's obviously not a political phrase. And the other, that the landing page that it led to said, in these hard times, we stand with the people of Israel. And I saw other videos promoted on TikTok that says, in these hard times, we stand with the people of Palestine, or we will continue to stand with the people of Palestine. So I asked the company, how come? Why things that are allowed for Palestinian videos are not allowed for Jews or for Israelis? And obviously, for me, it was a very strong bias, and it wasn't only in the paid ads section; it was also in organic content. We would receive, because Israel is such a small country, and it's built on. There's a word that it's I don't know if it exists in English. Combinot. Basically, everyone thinks that they can use, they can leverage.
They can fool the system.
Yeah, they fool the system.
Make a deal to fool the system.
If they know someone, so
Yeah.
that you know someone, you can fool the system. You can. So everyone, it's a small country. So Israeli content creators or pro-Israeli content creators who had problems with TikTok, they knew people on TikTok Israel in their offices, so they would call us all the time and tell us that they had problems. Many of them were blocked on October 7th, and many of them, and which I think is worse, they weren't blocked, but they were shadow banned, meaning they never received any notification that there is any problem with their content. But all of a sudden, they saw a huge drop in their reach, especially outside of Israel, meaning the Israeli point of view couldn't reach audiences outside of Israel. And we know for a fact that there was a tsunami of anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic content on TikTok abroad. So something felt very fishy to me. Something felt like there is a very strong bias against Israel, both in the policies and in the way those policies are being implemented, and content moderation. I did write about it to company officials, and I opened, you work in high tech, you know how it works. You need to, in big companies, you need to open a ticket and then make sure this ticket is being taken care of, and then you follow up in the system. And it's very easy for those things to take forever. And so, but I've done it all in the traditional way, okay, with those tickets and everything, but nothing changed. And then around the first night of the hostage deal, when Israel released terrorists in order to get hostages back.
Get a few women and some old people back.
Yeah, the first night was only women and young girls, including, I think, Abigail Idan, I think. So we were all in Israel. We were obviously very emotional about this night. Michael, I never cry. I never cry. Last time I cried was when my grandmother passed away. It was years ago. And that night I cried. I was basically, my eyes were a fountain. I cried for hours. And then someone told me to check something up on the internal system of the TikTok employees. It's called LARC. And I realized that there is an internal group called Palestinian Support. I joined it, and I saw that there are TikTok employees supporting not the released hostages, but the released terrorists. Some of them exploded cars. Some of them stabbed people on the streets in Jerusalem. And they were celebrating their release and were so happy and emotional about the release of those Hamas terrorists and other terrorists. And then I started scrolling back through this group, and I saw that these employees also promote BDS and supported the Houthis And they celebrated when the first night when the Houthis attacked Eilat with missiles. They celebrated and they were happy about it. And this was all on the internal company platform. So I started to ask who are these employees, and I'm going to be very cautious here because my lawyers always told me to be cautious. So not 100% of them,
Sure.
but 99.5% of them were in trust and safety teams, meaning they were in charge of the censorship of TikTok. They decided what content goes on and what content doesn't go on. And these are the people who celebrate Hamas and the Houthis and BDS. And I thought this was crazy. This was crazy. And I wrote an internal memo to the company with my initial claim was that there is a bias in policy and bias in content moderation. And then I added these screenshots and information about, those internal groups and the trust and safety employees who support terrorists and support BDS. And I also mentioned very hostile environment towards Jews on other TikTok sites. This is something that I haven't personally experienced because I work here in Israel. So there aren't any anti-Semites here in Israel, but I hope so. But in other offices, there were many.
Yeah.
There were many incidents.
I heard about Spain and Ireland were places that kind of popped up.
In Ireland, things are crazy, but also in London and in France and other places, there were Jewish employees reported that they came to work after October 7th, and no one spoke to them, including their bosses. They were completely ignored by everyone as non-existent. Okay, or other employees who received very disturbing anti-Semitic remarks, and they
such as.
For example, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but I'll give you one example, and I'll try to do it without too many details. But one of them said that they had a team day, and then they had some games and group games, and then one of them she experienced very harsh remarks about Jews and money and being in control of the world, etc. And then she reported it to HR and ethics office, and she said it's not something that I experienced, but this is something I saw on Lark on an open Lark group, that she claims that no one ever talked to her and no one ever dealt with this with her reports. So I added these harsh feelings of Jewish employees to the internal memorandum that I wrote. It was a very elaborated and detailed and long memo, and I sent it to the management of the company. And I was a bit I don't know how to call it, chutzpah, Jewish chutzpah, whatever. But I sent it to all of the C levels who report directly to the CEO and ethics office, GR, HR, PR teams in America, in Israel, and in Europe, and to my manager and all of the managers up to the CEO,
up to China.
This CEO of TikTok is not in China. He's in Singapore. Mm-hmm. TikTok is owned by a Chinese company, but TikTok as a company is it splits between Singapore and the United States, mm-hmm. and London. The reaction was crazy. The first reaction, I mean, I thought that maybe I was naive, that if I raised red flags to the company about employees who support terrorists and they are in charge of the content moderation, and this content moderation is being infamous on all of the traditional media as anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic, I assumed or hoped that they would say, these are hard accusations, Barak, and we're gonna take it very, very seriously and deal with it and change it and fix the problem. No, the first reaction was by some managers wrote me, who else have seen this? Who else have you consulted with?
Who else have seen your letter?
Yeah, who else have seen this letter? Did you send it to anyone who's not mentioned in the letter? There were they were panicked about it. And then later on, they sent a Jewish employee, very, very senior. He approached me and he said, I'm Jewish too. I understand that we have a problem here in TikTok, and I feel very much like you, and this anti-Semitic wave in the world is very dangerous. Let's go over your memo together. Let's read it together and think together, how can we fix it. I can help, because he said that he can help because he's a senior in the company. And I thought it was a very great offer, and we scheduled a meeting. And then halfway through the meeting, I realized that I'm under investigation. It's not really a meeting of let's fix things together. It's more of an investigation. At this point, the memo was they transferred it to other people, other employees. So at this point, I think tens of people were exposed to the letter, 20, 30, 40, I don't know exactly how many, and other groups, etc. And of course, the CEO as well. And he told me in this meeting that parts of this memo leaked to Fox News. At this point, I was very scared about it, because I planned to stay in TikTok for many years, and I was in a senior position there. It was a great job, to be honest. Yes, but so I was afraid that they would think that I was the one who leaked it. But it was very clear to me that they thought it leaked from somewhere in Europe for some reasons, and that he asked me if I have any friends in Europe, in the other European offices. Who are my friends there? Who do I talk to on a regular basis from European offices? And I told him, I think you waste your time in the wrong place. I think the real problem is with employees who actively support the Houthis. Whoever supports the Houthis, that's crazy.
There's people on college campuses begging them to bomb another ship.
Yeah, now there is a
stop
chant.
Pharmaceutical supplies to
chant.
Europe.
But it's
raise the cost of all products around the world and increase inflation, and support a terror organization that has done nothing for the West or anything else other than kill people.
Well, they were removed from the terror organization list, but
they're back now.
Oh, they're back. Okay. So, but I think it's interesting you mentioned the campuses, because I think that there's a connection between what people see on TikTok and later on they chant on campus.
No question. Just like at the Bin Laden letter, for example.
TikTok, generally speaking, was very fast, very quick. You might say that it was quick in removing this trend. It took them 2 days. It's very crucial 2 days, to be honest. But, in such a big company, you can say that 2 days is fast enough to remove such a trend. But I think they only removed it because it gained so much media coverage.
And because by that point, millions, if not tens of millions of people have already seen it or heard it or whatever. It was
but what if it weren't covered by New York Times?
Oh, they would have let it go there forever.
Maybe. Yeah. Who knows? Jackson Hinkle. Have you heard the name? So
yeah.
Jackson Hinkle. If some of our listeners don't know, he's anti-Israel, but also anti-America and anti-Ukraine and anti-everything, basically.
Well, he's not anti-Russia.
He's not anti-Russia and he's not anti-communism.
Right, exactly.
But he's anti-everything Western and everything that makes sense. And I wrote a separate internal memorandum before that to the company about his content on TikTok. He was banned from most other platforms.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a verified TikTok account, but his content is booming on TikTok. And I sent them links to videos with hundreds of thousands of views, with very crazy accusations of the IDF bombing. He says that the October 7th never happened, and it's the IDF bombed Israeli citizens. These videos, I checked a few days ago, these videos are still on TikTok. Bin Laden gained some media coverage by traditional media, and that's why it was removed. But what other content is still on the platform? So that's basically was my story. And then in January, after a few more trials, I tried to ask them if anything is being done with my letter, if they're going to change anything. The answers that they gave me were ridiculous.
Give me an example.
They sent someone from ethics office to talk to me, and she said, we take it very, very seriously, and we will take some actions as a company, but we will never be able to tell you what are these actions again exactly. So I told her, I'm not expecting for you to tell me if a specific person with their name was fired, because obviously it breaches their confidentiality. But I do expect to understand if you change anything in the policy. How do you recruit trust and safety teams? How do you oversee their work? Is anything being done with employees who support terrorists on the internal platform? They said that they will remove those messages on the internal platform that support the Houthis and Hamas. And I told them that's not the problem. The fact that it's on the platform is not the problem. The fact that these people are the censors of TikTok, this is a problem. This is a real problem.
Did they remove the messages?
They removed some of them.
They removed some of them.
But one thing that happened later on after I left is that they removed the Jews and the Israelis from those groups of supporting Palestine, so they won't be able to screenshot and complain and open other tickets in complaining about it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what they removed.
How do you think trust and safety people were hired?
I don't know, and it's a big question, and they never answered it. I'm pretty sure that they didn't look actively for people who are anti-Semitic. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that I hope and I assume that the CEO of TikTok and the C-levels that managers that directly report to him are not anti-Semitic and not specifically against Israel. Maybe most
or
of them.
pro-terrorists for that matter.
Or pro-terrorists.
Right.
Maybe. But I thought that after they saw that there is a problem in their company and they chose not to act upon it, it becomes a policy. So
I agree with that. So you resign in January. You finally decide the fight is, you've been fighting, you're not making progress, you resign.
Yeah.
In the background, and you and I know each other partially through this, right? I had done some research, and other groups of people done some research showing a lot of nefarious things that were going on TikTok. And at some point, Congress in the United States decides to do something about this. And there you are sitting at home, and I can't remember who the member of Congress was right now, who quotes a letter that you wrote or a tweet that you wrote.
It was Senator Lindsey Graham.
Senator Lindsey Graham.
He basically grilled the CEO of TikTok in a Senate hearing for my resignation.
Right, because and you resigned in this very public letter that you posted on Twitter. Right?
Not exactly. I resigned. It was very interesting because my tweet was very vague. It was in these hard times when our existence as Jews is being under attack, people's priorities change. I quit TikTok. Am Israel Chai. That was what I wrote. But then the media immediately connected it with my internal memorandum that has leaked way before. So it was clear to people who, the reason I left was very clear by then. Yeah.
And so you stated very openly then, I mean, I'll just say it because you said it was vague, but it was at least clear to me that you decided to put your values ahead of your employment. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And you said at these times, meaning these are clarifying times, my values and the defense of my people and standing up for what's right is more important than my earning this great living that I'm earning. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay. And Senator Lindsey Graham then, in a congressional hearing with Mr. Chu, who's the CEO of TikTok in the U.S., then quotes your letter, and you're sitting, I don't know where.
I haven't watched it. I didn't watch it in real time.
Yeah.
Someone tagged me on TikTok, on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I was shocked, to be honest. I was shocked. When I posted on TikTok, on Twitter, I have received numerous requests from Congress people and senators to talk to them, and I refused because back then I was really afraid that TikTok would hunt me down and sue me.
Did you get any threats
from TikTok?
Yeah.
No, not really.
From people around? Anybody else threaten you?
No, I was first. I received over 100 messages from TikTok employees supporting me, not only from Israel but from other places as well. They were very supportive until this day. You know, I want to be cautious here, but I hear that some TikTok officials are trying to talk bad against me in some places, but I never received any threats.
Take it as a compliment. And so Senator Graham quotes you in a Senate hearing. Your phone begins to blow up from people saying, hey, Senator Graham did this. And then you subsequently wrote a bunch of pieces and did a couple of press interviews. What were you trying to get out about TikTok?
The first thing I wanted to people to understand is I saw a very, very clear and very radical bias against Israel on the platform. And other people posted quantitative researches about those things. I never studied this thing.
Yeah, just to state them very openly. So, for example, Free Palestine versus pro-Israel was I forget, it was 50-1 or 60-1. I can't remember the exact number, or more than that to one. There was anything having to do with the Uyghurs or Free Tibet or whatever is not present on TikTok, but is present on Instagram. Various anti-Semitic lines or pro-Hamas lines are like multiple hundreds to one over what you find on Instagram or other social media platforms. And plus, there was also research to show that all sorts of content that got started in Malaysia and Indonesia then jumped to the United States as part of the TikTok algorithm. Go ahead.
Basically, what they claim is that TikTok doesn't behave as a real social media platform. It behaves as a tool for propaganda.
And then just
allegedly.
to be clear about the U.S. law, Section 230, which is supposed to say, okay, I'm not responsible. If I'm a social media platform like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, I'm not responsible for the content that's posted by users, but their algorithms are promoting certain content, which is changing public opinion, and they're still claiming Section 230.
Today, and this was part of my pitch when I talk to clients. TikTok is not a silly app. TikTok is a place where many Americans, many Europeans, and in Israel as well, go to consume their news.
Yeah,
and it's very influential. So basically, what I wanted to,
but do you think this was like intentional by TikTok and the Chinese to kind of change and control the minds of young Americans or young Westerners?
I don't have any evidence for this, but it makes sense first. And then, as I said, once you realize that there is a very strong bias, and once you realize that you have employees in very sensitive positions who actively influence the way things are portrayed on the media, on the platform, and you don't deal with it, I think it becomes a policy. So either it was a policy or became a policy, but it is a policy. And what I wanted the world to know, because I did give interviews about it to the New York Times and others and the Telegraph, that today it's Israel, but tomorrow it can be anything. It can be any other subject. It can be any other interest that militias or other entities have. The minds of young people in Western civilization, in Western countries, in European countries, in America, are being manipulated. And I think that the free world is in a war that it doesn't even understand that it loses. Maybe Israel is going to win over in Gaza with tanks and with missiles, maybe. I don't know. But one war that we already lost is the war on the narrative, is the war on the public perception in the West, within allied countries. And I think TikTok TikTok is being a tool for this war, and we need to wake up and we need to understand this.
So I assume you agree with the law passed in the United States that TikTok should be divested to U.S. ownership.
Generally speaking, the answer is yes. This is an internal American issue,
and
more important than this specific law. I think that after the study that you mentioned that showed that the TikTok is not behaving naturally on some issues, TikTok decided to block its data that allowed those studies.
Yeah, when Jeff Morris Jr. or Anthony Goldblum started working on this data, it started to get some traction, and then TikTok blocked it because
crazy.
Why be transparent?
So I think
when you're trying to be nefarious,
I think the first thing that we need to demand from TikTok, especially from TikTok because it's owned by some entities that we're not quite sure how they behave, is for full transparency on everything, not the algorithm itself, but we need to understand what people in America see. Where is it coming from? Where are those videos being pushed from? In what volume each hashtag is being promoted? These are things that we need to understand and we need to know.
So I want to come back to what you said a minute ago. We're in 3 distinct wars right now. One is a kinetic war, tanks, battlefield, wherever it is, the Houthis, missiles. The second is a narrative war, and the third is a values war on some level, right? It's kind of called Marxist-Leninist communist values against free world Western values. And then this war of narratives. These are asymmetric wars right now, right? Because TikTok, for example, doesn't play by the same rules that Instagram plays by, and the Chinese won't play by the same rules the Americans play by, neither in narratives nor in values. And TikTok is like a education or mind control mechanism, which to control the minds, you don't need to win on the battlefield, so to speak. How do you win a war like this? You like had the inside seat. You were in the prime minister's office. You then went to the TikTok side. How do you win this war?
First, I think we need to understand that we need to win this war. I posted something on X today about it. And people said, this is a war we can't really win, okay? When you see photos from Gaza of babies in the rubble, we can't win this war. I say we must win this war. We don't have any choice. We need to win this war eventually. Not us as Israel specifically, us as the democratic countries, the democratic world. We don't have much of a choice. In the defense, first, we need much more clear and vigorous and smart regulation on social media and on campuses as well, because we know that money is being transferred to universities from some countries that are not very friendly to the notion of the democracy.
So what would be the most effective way to win this war on the narratives and the values in social media?
I think that we need to first realize what is our story. Okay, what is our true story that we want to convey out? Because the other side, they have very good stories to tell. Okay, they have stories of small, weak entities like in Gaza, the Palestinian people, for example, is very weak, is very small. It's against big America and the huge amount of power that Israel has, and it's a colonialism. This is a story they tell. Okay, it's a story that is very compelling. People buy this story. It's a very good story. We need to tell a whole different story, and which I think is true. If we talk about
what's the story?
If we talk about Israel specifically, the story is that we are a small nation inside a very hostile, very strong world around us. Very wealthy entities that are anti-democratic values, anti-LGBT, anti-women rights, etc. And they try to extinct this tiny island of democratic sanity in this place. I think we need to reverse it. Israel and and America and democracy is currently under attack from malicious powers that wants to harm personal freedoms. I think that many people in those campuses, they don't even understand that they're being manipulated, and people are not they don't like to be manipulated and to understand that they're being lied to with the complete lies.
How would you wake them up?
It's a long battle, but I think we need to fight. We need to fight it. First, speak in their own language, in what interests them, what they care about. I care about as well, by the way, because I'm a gay liberal person, lives in Tel Aviv, enjoying the good life of Tel Aviv. I care about LGBT rights. I care about personal liberties. I care about democracy. We need to speak in this language to address these issues and these concerns, and show them that Hamas and its allies are not on the good side, or not on their side.
Yeah, that's for sure. Hamas, Iran, or China, who's most dangerous for Israel?
I don't know. I think that Iran is more obsessed with Israel specifically, so it's more scary. I don't think that China specifically has a obsession towards Israel. I think we need to be very cautious about this coalition that is being formed with them and with other
Russia
as
too,
well.
right? Yeah,
Russian, of course.
I asked Prime Minister Naftali Bennet, former Prime Minister Naftali Bennet, what question I should ask you, and he said, "Ask him, what are the biggest mistakes you've made?"
Me?
That's classic Prime Minister Bennet, by the way. I remember this when he was a CEO. What are the biggest mistakes you've made?
I've done too many, so where to start?
He'd insist on a specific one.
I'll give you two good ones. Okay, one is for many years I worked with politicians like Naftali Bennet and others. I felt like in some places I knew the right answer, but I didn't insist on it because I felt that I'm not big enough around them. I don't have the
you don't have the gravitas or the presence or the confidence.
Yeah. And eventually, I think I should have been more confident about what I feel and what my gut's telling me. The second thing is more, which I think is more interesting around TikTok and this world, is that I think I was too hesitant before I left TikTok. And even though some would say that I had the guts to leave TikTok and interview about it, I should have done it earlier. I should have done it bigger, because when I left TikTok and when I was ready to speak about the bias, I think the world already moved on from being on the side of Israel. And I think timing is everything in life, probably, right? And in a better timing, I think it would have drawn much more attention and make more impact.
Wow. I think, by the way, there's a general lesson that I've admired you for standing up for your values and taking hard decisions, but I think that self-reflection point that I could have done it earlier, maybe change the tide, is remarkable. When Elon Musk was here in Israel and people were talking to him about kind of curbing some of the anti-Semitism on X, he made the point, and I then echoed it I wrote it in Hebrew, which ended up, I think, becoming the most read Hebrew tweet ever, because Elon retweeted it with a verse from Proverbs, a verse from Mishlei. And his approach on X is what I would call radical free speech. They ban almost nobody there, but the algorithm is also not tipped like TikTok's was to kind of suppress pro-Israel and promote pro-Hamas or promote pro-China. How do you think about the X view of free speech, given what you said to me earlier about what kind of spreads on these platforms? I argue that in the land of social media, the X model is the best one. But how do you think about it kind of objectively?
I tend more towards the X model, because I'm a very enthusiastic about free speech. I think it's crucial for democratic societies. But two things. One, it has to be on both sides.
Yep.
Okay. Unlike on TikTok, what I saw on TikTok is that they did censor some things, but only for one side.
Yep.
Okay. So
agreed.
As long as it's fair, it's one a major thing. And the other thing is that on X, there are still some things that I would remove.
Jackson Hinkle?
Not Jackson Hinkle, because Jackson Hinkle, he can lie, and then Musk added these community notes that he can...
I think that's a great architecture for what it's worth. What they did to Raisi when he died, and the BBC called him someone like...
Yeah.
People could think of him as a decent guy, my God.
No,
right? And community notes... Flame the BBC. God bless community notes.
I think it's brilliant. But some things are much more hateful and some things are much more violent.
Yeah.
And when it comes to things that spark violence, I think there should be some moderation. So if there's China on the one hand with a very strict censorship and Elon Musk on the other hand, it's somewhere... I lean towards Elon Musk, but I think it can be 10% less.
Where do you trust the news more, BBC or X?
X is not X, because X is people on X,
right?
I don't trust the BBC because I know what they report.
Right.
But I think we need to learn and teach our children and other people to consume from various sources. If you consume from various sources, and you know that this one leans towards one side and the other one leans towards the other side, and you can have a more broad picture of the world, it's healthy. Never rely only on BBC, or never rely only on Jackson Hinkle, and never rely on the other side as well.
What do you do when you're not working in your free time? And now you're unemployed.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I'm much more occupied than before. I don't know why. But
we like to say that some of these big companies, there's like silent unemployment, but I don't think that was the case with you.
First, I like to write. I like to express myself. And recently I'm working on a new project. I want to take the last part of our conversation about the West losing a fight it doesn't even know it fights, and bring it to more audiences. And I'm working on a new lecture.
Good for you.
And it's I want to make it a hobby and a mission.
I want to ask you one last question, because I think the last 5 months have been instructive, and I know you've been through ups and downs, and people attacked you, and there was time to be concerned, and there was an incredible time of being brave, and you've been very kind of, I would say, raw and open during this time. What makes you vulnerable?
To be honest, not much nowadays. I think I think when you're very confident in what you do, then you're less vulnerable. One thing that I can tell you, I visited Kfar Aza, one of the villages that were destroyed by Hamas on the raid. Since then, every time I hear about those stories from the October 7th, it harms my ability to move on in this day. And to be honest, this experience with TikTok, I think it made me so much stronger and more confident because it's the first time that I actually paid a price for something that I truly believe in, and I paid a heavy price. I must say, very heavy price.
I know you did.
I lost some friendships.
I know you did.
I was great salary, everything. But the doing this action of taking this action when you know you're going to pay the prices and it scares you to death, and you don't know if they're going to sue you in America, and it's scary, but you do it anyway. I think it strengthened me. It strengthened me dramatically.
Amazing. You can learn more and read more about Barak on X, formerly Twitter, at Barak Her. That's spelled Barakher. Barak, thank you. That was great.
Thank you.